Greetings, children of the screen, and happy Alien Day. Your friendly neighborhood nerd scum here once again. And that's right, guys, it is another Alien Day. And that means, going through all the things I've already covered, means it's time for us to talk about 2012's Prometheus. Yay. So, Prometheus, Ridley Scott's grand return not only to the sci-fi genre, but to the franchise that he helped create, which so many people felt had just gone wildly off the rails. So this movie is either like the most frustrating, irritating disappointment of the last 25 years, or it is an awesome sci-fi horror ride and you're just thinking too much about it, depending on what camp you're talking about. Or talking to, I should say. But I feel that, like, really, this movie has a lot of great things in it, I will say that up front, but it also has a lot of problems, and that is seemingly the running theme of this. Now, it is true that a lot of the people who are really, really disappointed in this movie is because they were looking for a prequel and kind of a follow-up to the Alien franchise. And it's very clear that this movie had very little interest in actually being that. And in a weird way, it kind of has a similar effect as the 2018 Halloween movie, where that movie kind of says the first movie happened, but none of the others happened. This is different because it's a prequel, so it doesn't have to say that those things didn't happen, but it clearly is discounting them. And what's interesting about that, though, in the same way of the Halloween movie, is that while it's trying to do its own thing over here, it keeps calling back to things from the established lore and franchise that you know and remember. So the movie on both those films, and specifically Prometheus, it creates this kind of inherent cognitive dissonance that permeates every level and facet of the film. So there's never a scene where they introduce a new idea or concept that doesn't also, in some way, reference things that we're already familiar with from the franchise, while also discounting and trying to separate itself from them. So it's very hard to look at this movie just as its own thing and enjoy it, because there's so much like, hey, remember this from Aliens? Yeah, you remember that, don't you? Fucking forget about it, okay? Because that's not what we're fucking talking about. We're talking about robots and giant, tall, bald guys who engineered human beings, okay? And fuck you for even thinking about Alien right now. By the way, look at this little creature that looks just like a thing from Alien, right? So yeah, it's a really weird thing. But I'm going to go into, real quick, some of the things that I think really, really work in the movie, and some of the things that don't really work. And just to get this out of the way first, I'm going to talk about the things that are related or adjacent to the rest of the Alien franchise, and then I'm going to more address the movie on its own as if it's not part of that franchise. So let's go ahead and dive into that. As a prequel to Alien or to the Alien franchise, this movie pretty much utterly fails on every level. So yeah, not only does it not answer a single solitary question that we had, that the first Alien kind of introduced to our minds, it also actively does things that kind of not even alter that movie, but add an extra layer of context to that movie that takes everything that was really powerful and mysterious and diminishes it to quite a great extent. And some of the examples of this are that, the space jockey from the original Alien, turns out he's just an engineer that when he sits in his bomber chair, like, he gets a crazy spacesuit. And, like, that sucks, but also, when we see it in this movie, it's about half or a third of the size of what we see in the original Alien. So not only have you kind of demystified that whole aspect of it, but you've also kind of, like, turned it into, like, the most pathetic, happenstancel kind of version, that's not even a word, but I'm using it, of what that thing was. Like, there's just nothing interesting about that anymore. That imagery and that kind of awesomeness that's set up there. Furthermore, things such as, like, again, none of the questions are answered, but, like, we always got the indication that the ship from the first movie is like a bomber that's going to drop these eggs. But now it's really confusing because it's like, okay, but now we have the cauldrons that have the the black goo in it, and like you're never in the movie, we never connect how that is directly related to that, but the ships are set up in almost identical function and fashion, but it is so dissimilar that it, again, it's the thing I'm talking about, like with the cognitive dissonance. It's just like the two things don't make sense when you put them together, and because you're trying to, you can't help but feel that like it almost lessens the original idea to a certain degree, because it's like, oh, well, if the black goo is the really powerful weapon, then why the fuck are they even messing with the xenomorphs in the other one? And where did he get them? And all these other things. Again, like I said, it actively wants you to remember the thing from Alien, while also telling you to fucking forget about it, because this has nothing to do with it. But it does just a little bit. And again, like, we keep getting all these references to the different life cycles of the alien, but it's so far removed that, like, it might as well be its own thing, which the movie clearly is trying to do in places. And again, the movie tries to do all these things that kind of mirror the original franchise, but because of the way this movie is set up, it completely falls flat. So, like, they have the whole breakfast scene that's supposed to mirror the scene from Alien, but it's completely different because those guys were basically, like, space truckers. They were, like, salt of the earth, blue-collar guys, and, like, they'd been out there for a long time and had a dynamic and relationships that already were intact, and we're learning them as we're seeing them. In this movie, it's a bunch of highly paid, intelligent, top-of-their-field scientists and mercenaries who have no idea who each other are, and so the mirroring of those two scenes, neither in themes or tone or character, like, none of it maps, none of it makes sense. Like, it is the complete opposite of that other scene. So essentially we're just wasting time on a nod to the original movie, which again only implants the idea more that this should feel more like an Alien movie, but it does not. So yeah, that's a big problem for me, where it keeps kind of taking some of these original ideas and diluting them and kind of adding extra layers on top of them that make them far less impactful or interesting than how they were originally, like, presented. And beyond that, what's really sad about it, and again, this is a movie that I followed from the first moment it was announced, where, like, and I've read some of the early drafts of the script, and some of that stuff was real exciting because it really was a movie that tied in more closely as a true prequel to Alien. It wasn't just another movie in that universe. And a lot of those things, you can tell what they were originally supposed to be because the skeletal remains of that stuff is still in this movie. Good example, again, is like when we go into the room with the canisters of the cauldrons that have the black goo. Why is there... Now, it's a deacon alien, but clearly when you look at that thing, it's supposed to be representing a queen alien in the egg-laying room. Like, also, we don't see the deacon until the end of the movie, but we hear the deacon screech in the recording of... So, like, is this something that always happens? And, like... But it doesn't make sense within the framework of having the deacon up there or the queen alien up there. There are also, again, like, you can clearly tell the canisters were originally supposed to be the eggs. That thing was clearly originally supposed to be a queen alien. So, like, all those things, all the things about the... all the elements and all of the, like, pieces of the movie that we wanted to see are still in this movie, just obscured and covered with a bunch of bullshit that has nothing to do with it. And it makes it really frustrating, especially when you're someone like me who has followed the movie since those early inceptions, because over time I just saw this movie get whittled down from something I really wanted to see to something that I really don't give a fuck about. Okay, so separating this from the Alien franchise, just trying to look at it as its own movie, let's go into that for a second, because I will say that this movie is beautiful. Like, the cinematography is absolutely fantastic, like, the colors and the actual shots that they use, like, everything is fantastic, and it is beautiful. So people who just appreciate this movie in terms of the spectacle, I absolutely get it. The set design, like, everything about the way that the movie looks is great. I do kind of miss, like, the kind of rustic, kind of, you know, dirtier look of some of the other franchise, but again, we're looking at this just as its own thing, and then this kind of, like, weird, hyperbolic 2001 kind of style that they've got going for most of the movie, I do really appreciate that, and it worked out very well. And then going down from there, holy shit, are there diminishing returns on every other aspect of this. So first off, let's just go into the writing of the film. Now, I'm not gonna shit on Home Dude from Lost, but I will say that, like, I'm not mentioning him here just because I don't like Lost. I'm pretty indifferent to Lost. I'm much more disappointed in his Star Trek Into Darkness script. But yeah, like, there's a lot of quirks of his writing that make it into this, like, references for the sake of references that don't actually add to the plot or theming of the movie. But it's worse than that because really he didn't even write the original draft of the script. And again, this is a studio movie. It's one of the reasons why it's such a clusterfuck, is because there are so many people on so many levels trying to do their own thing. Like, they had an original script that was pretty good, but then Ridley Scott wanted changes. They brought Home Dude in to make the changes, and the whole thing just falls apart. Like, there are like 9 to 12 different themes that this movie introduces in the first 30 minutes, and none of them are ever paid off because they're jumping around trying to do too many things. They're not doing what a science fiction movie is supposed to do, which is present an interesting theme in the form of like a question, and then basically spend the rest of that movie exploring that and really diving into it and going into like the philosophical and scientific implications of that. This movie doesn't do any of that shit. It's almost like The Matrix in the way that it just wants to throw interesting ideas up at you so that you feel that the movie's really smart, but it doesn't actually do anything with those ideas. You know? Like, it's all window dressing to make you forget that essentially you're watching a B monster movie. And that's what this movie really is in terms of its plot, and in terms of its story, and in terms of the way its characters are written. The basic plot is just, and again, the original Alien was like this too, but looking at this on its own, it's a haunted house movie in space. You know, a bunch of people get together, they go to a strange place out in the middle of nowhere, horrible things happen, they can't get away. Like, that's all this story is, with monsters everywhere, okay? Like, that's all it is. And even worse than that, like, generic plot is the fact that the characters in the movie are completely and totally cliches of everything people think poorly of in horror movie characters. Like, these are supposed to be very intelligent, highly trained scientists and professionals, but they're acting like the stupid drunk kids in a slasher movie. You know, and people have gone into this crap before, so I'm not going to go too far into it, like with Home Dude Biologist, who fucking is afraid of dead bodies, you know, like, you know the whole thing, okay? But yeah, none of these characters behave in a way that is natural to their character or to the story that they're in. All of them behave in a manner that moves the story to the next scene, and that is the end of it. None of the rest of their character matters at all, except for maybe the character of David, who, again, is clearly the only character that Ridley Scott cared about when making this movie, and it's why he's the main character of the next fucking movie, okay? And when we're talking about things that are inconsistent, this isn't necessarily a character, but I guess it kind of is. The black goo in this movie has no rules whatsoever. This black goo, other than the idea that you can, like, seal it off in an environment where it becomes inert, once you get it out of that inert environment, it never behaves the same way on two different, like, even two humans doesn't behave the same way. Any creature that it interacts with, it does completely different things. Sometimes it disintegrates them, sometimes it creates new creatures inside of them, sometimes it mutates them into a different creature altogether. Like, it makes no fucking sense, it has no consistency, it's just a magical goo that can do whatever cool thing we need to get another creature out of this scene. It's ridiculous and stupid and bullshit. Like, oh my god, it's a great concept at its core, but it's clear that nobody actually took the time to figure it out, because they're like, oh, it's mysterious and science fiction bullshit. We don't need to know how it works, because our humans will never find out how it works, and the audience will never find out how it works, so it doesn't fucking matter how it works. We can do anything. We can have it make people fly and fucking fart buildings over if we want to. We can do any goddamn thing. The sky's the limit, because it's all fucking fake bullshit in a horror movie. And that's the way most of this movie's story, script, and plot is treated. And then, like, with an extra pass of, like, oh yeah, but scientific questions, the origin of man, our mortality, faith versus religion versus science. Ooh, aren't you entertained by these big concepts that we're never going to fucking address? Boom, a monster. And that's really all this movie's writing is. It's bullshit. And this is coming from someone who loves horror movies, but, like, when you have a movie with this big a budget that is doing things, like, visually is so big and epic, if you have just, like, a standard B-movie plot and B-movie characters, it's not enough to throw a bunch of big fucking ideas in the first 30 minutes of the movie. Like, you actually have to do something with that, and this movie fails at that on every possible turn, on every possible level. It does fucking nothing. And even for the people who are like, oh, well, they'll answer it in the next movie, now we've got the next movie, and they didn't answer any of that fucking shit. So, yeah. And I know a lot of people with the writing, specifically where the characters are concerned, will say, yeah, but did you watch the deleted scenes? Because look at all that stuff that hit the cutting room floor. Yeah, I've seen a lot of the deleted scenes, and it's true that there are actual character, like, arcs for people that are completely cut out of the movie. But that's the problem, is that at some point in the movie, like, creation and the scripting and even the filming process, those very important character beats were considered to be essential to the story. But by the time we get to the movie, what we have is it's been cut down and edited down to only the bare essentials of what you need, so that when something else happens later, it doesn't come completely out of left field. So I will at least give them credit for keeping sets, like setups for other things that are happening. But yeah, like, the actual characters as they were created don't really exist in the movie. That's not in the fucking movie, so it does not fucking count. And I will give credit to some of these actors, because with the very little bit they were given, they really, like, gave some pretty solid performances for the most part. But unfortunately, Idris Elba, frickin', you know, Charlize Theron, and Guy Pearce and Michael Fassbender, they couldn't fucking save this movie. They couldn't save the writing in this movie, okay? Especially when all their best bits are left on the cutting room floor. And that is a perfect opportunity for me to transition into the editing on this film. Holy fuckballs. The editing on this film is pretty awful. The film is shot very beautifully, so a lot of it's not as noticeable to a lot of people as I think it is to me. But yeah, this film is edited very, 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 very badly, man. Like, holy shit. Like, the first 45 minutes drag along at a snail's pace, which would be fine for the kind of cerebral science fiction 2001 movie, but it's clear that once we get past that point, that that's not what this movie intends to be. So the rest of all of that, it's like all of a sudden we're going, oh, no, 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 and then, blah, all of a sudden here's some action scenes and some crazy shit, and then all of a sudden the whole thing will just fucking stop, so you can have those conversation scenes that'll set things up later, and then fucking action scene, crazy shit happening. You know? And it's just like, the pacing is fucking spastic and ADHD for the second 2 acts of the movie. But for the first act of the movie, it's trying to present itself as like this high art, high concept sci-fi film. Not to mention, it's clear that some of the scenes have been rearranged. So there's like the scene where, what's his name? He turns into like a zombie crab thing, and like they have a huge fight in the hangar bay, which I know is a scene that the studio asked to be reshot because there wasn't enough action in the movie. But instead of dropping it into that boring-ass first 45 minutes of the movie to actually give us some kind of indication of what the movie's actually supposed to be, they shoehorned it into one of the most hectic parts of the movie, and on top of that, one of the ways you can tell that it's been moved into, like, a place in the movie that even it wasn't originally shot for, you can tell in the shooting of it, it was meant to be way on the end of the movie, because fucking Waylon is already around. You can see him in the background of a shot, along with David. And it's just in there. I guess they just think that it moves fast enough nobody's going to notice. And that's also in some of the earlier trailers, where we also see that Shaw was originally in this scene. So, like, in the scene, we never get to see who's inside the thing driving, but if you look real close in some of the shots, you can tell that it's her in there. They didn't even try to fucking hide it. They just counted on the fact that it was moving so fast that we were too stupid to fucking notice it. So yeah, the editing in this movie also sucks. It's just like, holy crap, man. It's like, even when you separate this from being an Alien movie, like a part of the Alien franchise, and you just look at it on its own, other than the way it's shot, and a few scenes that are, like, interesting because of the performances, the movie just falls apart on every fucking level. Like, there's nothing about this movie that holds up. There's nothing about this movie that in 10 years people are going to be looking back as like a milestone of cinema or something that pop culturally is burnt into their head. And it's, God, the film has so much promise, but at the end of the day, even as a standalone film on its own, it just falls short and becomes ultimately horribly disappointing. Even if this was just Ridley Scott's return to sci-fi, doing something that is completely its own, I still would have been disappointed, which sucks, man, because, like, all the themes and ideas they introduce in this movie are really cool, and I would like to see that movie separated from the Alien franchise where he's really able to, like, focus in on that. But of course, because of the way this movie did, the next movie just decided, fuck it, we're gonna throw out most of that shit and just, you know, give you, like, a very, like, haphazard, like, hand-fisted version of, like, well, fuck, you want xenomorphs? Here's the xenomorphs. That's where they come from. Fuck all the high-concept, cool ideas. This is just going to be another monster movie set in space. Because that's what the studio or some... I don't even know who the fuck thought we wanted to see this. I also don't know who the fuck thought we wanted the Alien movies to be all about the robot. Like, this isn't Blade Runner, man. Like, just do your own thing. I don't know, man. I don't like fucking Prometheus.
Take us round.
Bringing it down in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Prometheus has landed.
Cut it off! Cut it off!
So yeah. I don't like Prometheus, but having said that, is it the worst film out of the entire Alien franchise, especially if you include Alien vs. Predator? It's definitely not. There are definitely worse movies in the franchise that have all the problems this movie has, and then a lot of other worse ones. And if you are someone who's just going in looking for something that looks cool and has, like, cool monsters and stuff like that, I can definitely see how this movie is enjoyable. For me personally, I can't separate it from the franchise that I grew up loving and from all the things that this film was supposed to be originally enough, and I think that the film can't separate itself from that enough for me to really invest myself in it or see it as a piece of higher art. And again, some of the previous movies that were bad, they were just monster movies in space, and I was fine with that because I had no expectation of them being anything greater or grander. But with this movie, we were promised that, like, both by Ridley Scott and by the studio, and by all the marketing and the advertising. We were promised that this was going to be not only a return to the true Alien, but it was going to take us higher and further than any of the movies had ever taken us. And it fails to deliver on that in every possible way. So, yeah, those are my thoughts on Prometheus. And now that I've covered this, fuck, that means next year I'm going to have to do Alien Covenant. Or I could just start going back and remastering all my Alien videos and just doing new versions of them, because, like, they're from, like, the first year of my channel, and some of them are from when I could only do slideshows, and they're not that great. But, you know what, I'm going to have the link for all those videos on a playlist down in the description below, so I definitely recommend you check those out here on this Alien Day, and then you let me know if I should if I should cover Alien Covenant Net 1, 2, 3, go. And then you let me know if I should cover Alien Covenant next, or if I should start redoing those videos, because I don't want to cover Alien Covenant next. I don't want to do it. But anyway, guys, thank you very much for watching. I hope y'all have a good one. Nerd Scum, out.